Welcome back to the deep dive. We're about to plunge into the latest really impactful developments in AI.
Yep, focusing today on the key bits from the AI Daily News Digest. That's the one from July 9th, 2025.
Exactly. There's just so much noise out there.
There really is.
Yeah.
So our job today is to cut through that and give you the critical insights, the stuff you actually need to know.
And maybe some surprising facts along the way.
Hopefully, without getting totally lost in the fire hose of information.
Yeah, the pace just feels relentless, doesn't it? Like every week there's something new.
Absolutely.
But what actually matters? What's going to impact, your work, your curiosity?
Right. Or even just how you interact with tech day to day.
So today we're focusing on some really interesting areas. We've got advancements in these small open source models.
Very exciting stuff there.
And then specialized AI for coding. Some new hardware that's maybe not quite what it seems.
And the bigger picture of how powerful AI is just becoming, well, available to billions.
Billions, yeah. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's kick things off with HuggingFace. They've got this SmolLM3-3B.
Okay.
And they're calling it the best 3B model out there. Why is that claim? Why should we pay attention?
But what's really exceptional about SmolLM3, the 3B, isn't just that it's open weights. Lots of models are open weights now.
Okay.
This one is fully open source.
Yeah.
And when we say fully, we really mean it. They've released the pre-training code.
The actual code.
Yeah, the code, the data they use, the whole training recipe, everything.
Wow.
So it's not just transparent. It kind of sets a new, like a high watermark for truly open models right now.
And that means for you, the listener, you can really dig in.
Exactly. You can inspect it, you can modify it, build right on top of it. There's no black box.
Which helps if you're building something very specific, I guess.
Precisely. Things that maybe the big closed models would never get around to because they're too niche or proprietary.
That level of openness is definitely a big deal for builders. But practically speaking, using it day to day, what are the benefits? I heard something about dual mode reasoning.
Yeah, that's right. It has this dual mode reasoning. So it can operate in a think mode or a no think mode.
Like faster versus more thorough?
Kind of, yeah. It's a way to optimize compute. And reports say it's incredibly fast, especially on Apple's M4 Max chip.
Okay.
And importantly, it already has day zero support in mlx-lm. That's Apple's framework.
So it works out of the box there.
Pretty much. And maybe even more crucial, support's already merged into Llama.cpp.
Oh, nice. That's huge for wider deployment.
Yeah, makes it much easier for developers to run it on all sorts of hardware, not just high-end Macs, even CPUs sometimes.
So super fast, super accessible, great combo. But this wasn't just whipped up overnight, was it?
Oh, definitely not. If you look at the bigger picture, this thing is the result of like a 2-year effort. Yeah, HuggingFace and their collaborators, they've been slowly, carefully building up the data set that actually made this model possible. And that dedication to high-quality open data, that's what really supercharges innovation for you in the open source world.
Right. It gives you a solid foundation to build on.
Exactly. Your next great idea, that custom app you want, maybe it starts with a model like this, built on that kind of long-term shared investment. It really does lower the barrier for cutting-edge stuff.
Okay, so open source is pushing hard. But the big players, like NVIDIA, they're not standing still either, especially in specific areas like coding.
Right. NVIDIA is definitely active there. They just released the Open Code Reasoning Nemotron 1.1 series.
Okay, Nemotron. I've heard that name.
Yeah. These come in 7 billion, 14 billion, and 32 billion parameter sizes.
Well, a few options then.
And what's interesting is they're derived from Qwen 2.5, but NVIDIA specifically post-trained them for code reasoning and generation.
So fine-tuned just for code smarts.
Yeah, exactly. Understanding code, writing code logically. They've got pretty big context windows, too, up to 64,000 tokens.
Which is essential if you're dealing with large projects.
Absolutely. And another plus, they're available for both commercial and non-commercial use.
Oh, that is developer-friendly. Big deal for businesses.
Yeah, it makes adoption much easier.
And how do they perform? Are these actually good code models? The numbers look pretty decent.
They are pretty compelling, yeah. The 14B model, for instance, scores 65.9 on Live Code Bench. That actually beats earlier Nemotron versions.
Okay, so progress there.
And the big one, the 32B, hit 69.9. Those are solid scores. Suggests they can genuinely help with complex coding tasks, generating code, finding bugs.
What's the secret sauce then? How did they train them to be so good at coding specifically?
Well, that's always the interesting part, isn't it? They use a specialized data set. It combined competitive programming questions.
Like tricky algorithm stuff.
Exactly. And high-quality answers generated by DeepSeek R10528. So basically teaching the model to think like a competitive programmer.
Makes sense. Train it on good examples.
Precisely. Now, there was one little technical hiccup reported for developers using Llama.cpp.
Oh.
Apparently, the chat template sometimes missed a starting tag for the reasoning output. A bit annoying.
But does it break things?
Seems not critically. It's confirmed that even with that small issue, the 14B model's internal thoughts still follow correct markdown. So the output quality, the clarity, it's still there. Good news for actually using it.
Okay, good to know. Right, let's pivot a bit. Hardware, always a hot topic. NVIDIA DGX Spark, highly anticipated, right?
Very much so.
Marketed as a mini supercomputer, but with a price tag up to $4,000, sounds beefy.
It definitely sounds impressive, yeah, that mini supercomputer label catches the eye. But when you actually look closely at the specs...
Oh, there's a but.
There's a but.
Yeah.
While it boasts, 1,000 TOPS, trillions of operations per second, the performance level is actually only about the same as an RTX 5070.
Okay, so good, but not earth-shattering compared to upcoming stuff.
Exactly. And it's significantly less powerful than the upcoming RTX 5090 is expected to be. So supercomputer, maybe a bit of marketing spin there.
Okay, TOPS is one thing, but memory bandwidth, that's often the real bottleneck for AI, isn't it? Especially big models.
That is absolutely crucial. And that's where the DGX Spark seems to have a substantial technical bottleneck.
How bad is it?
The reported memory bandwidth is 273 gigabits per second.
Which sounds like a lot, but compared to...
Right. For context, for you listening, that's about half the bandwidth of an Apple M4 Max, which you can get on a laptop now.
Only half. Wow. Okay.
It's only a quarter of an RTX 4090, which has been out for a while, and maybe just a sixth of what the RTX 5090 will offer.
Ouch. That's not great for heavy AI work.
It really limits its capability for demanding tasks, especially those big language models that just devour memory bandwidth, like having a race car engine fed through a straw.
So despite the hype, you're saying this thing might actually struggle with cutting-edge AI right from the start?
It raises a really important question about its relevance, its longevity.
Yeah.
There are already reports it struggles to run models like Llama.cpp.
Even quantized.
Even a Q4 quantization, which is a common trick to make models run faster.
Right.
So if it's already having trouble with a quantized version of a pretty standard large model right at launch, it suggests it could become outdated pretty quickly for people really pushing the LLM frontier.
So the takeaway for you, the listener, is?
Be critical. Look past the marketing hype. For hardware investments, especially in AI, you have to dig into the specs that actually matter, like memory bandwidth, not just the headline TOPS number.
Good advice. Okay, let's shift from that specialized, maybe slightly disappointing hardware to something much more widespread. AI getting into everything. Gemini Nano shipping in Chrome 137+.
Yeah, this is potentially massive, genuinely transformative.
How so?
Because it puts a local LLM, right, a powerful AI model, directly into the hands of, 3.7 billion Chrome users every month?
Wow, 3.7 billion.
Yeah. Running on your device, not needing the cloud for everything.
That's huge.
And we're seeing guides now for structured output, making it easier for devs to build cool stuff, leveraging that on-device power.
Yeah.
Opens up a lot of possibilities.
And we're not just talking fancy new phones, right? These small models can run on older stuff, too.
Exactly. That's the really cool part. There was a successful demo of Gemma 3, which is vision capable, and similar scale to Nano running stably on an old Pixel 6a.
A Pixel 6a? How much RAM does that even have?
Just 6 gigs. Now, okay, it was running at about 0.35 tokens per second, so not lightning fast.
But it worked stably.
Yes, stable and functional on pretty modest, older hardware. And similar good results seen on things like the Samsung S25, too.
That really shows how optimized these small models are getting.
It really does. It makes advanced AI genuinely accessible to almost everyone with a smartphone. Think about the privacy implications, too.
Right. On-device means your data doesn't have to leave.
Exactly. Drafting emails, analyzing personal docs, all securely on your phone. It could unlock a new wave of truly personal AI assistants.
That's a big shift. What about for the developers building with Gemini? Any new tools for them?
Definitely. The Gemini command line tool, the CLI, now has an explain mode.
Explain mode? What's that?
It's designed to help developers quickly get their head around large or unfamiliar code bases. You point Gemini at it, and it explains the structure, the features in plain English.
Oh, that sounds incredibly useful, like a quick onboarding tool.
Yeah, huge time saver. And for people using the API, there's a new batch mode.
Okay.
It offers 50% discounts on the Gemini 2.5 models and lets you queue up billions of tokens for processing.
Billions with a B. Wow. So much cheaper for large-scale tasks.
Exactly. Makes it way more cost-effective to process huge amounts of data, whether that's for training or inference. Again, lowering the barrier for developers.
This theme keeps coming back. Accessibility. Models getting smaller, APIs getting cheaper. Which brings us nicely to the actual compute infrastructure. Deep infra, making waves with dirt-cheap compute.
They certainly are making waves, yeah. The big headline, on-demand NVIDIA B200 instances for $1.99 an hour.
$1.99 for a B200
hour. Yep, per hour. People are calling it the cheapest price on the market for that kind of power.
That's unbelievable. How easy is it to actually get one?
Apparently it's via one-click deployment. Takes like 10 seconds to get it running.
Okay, that's genuinely game-changing speed and price for high-end compute.
It absolutely is. For you as a developer or researcher, getting access like that, it's a huge competitive advantage for training, for inference.
Levels the playing field a bit against the giants.
Definitely. Democratizes access to these top-tier GPUs. Now, the caveat?
Always a caveat. Availability.
Yeah, availability might be limited sometimes, just because demand is likely sky high at that price.
Makes sense.
And deep infra does offer other options, like a faster but pricier R1 turbo option for DeepSeek models. So there are tiers. You balance speed and cost.
So you have choices depending on your needs and budget.
Exactly. But the core point remains.
What does this mean for the bigger picture? For who gets to build the future of AI?
Well, if we zoom out, it's clear that you now have access to powerful compute that was unthinkable for individuals or small teams just a short time ago.
Yeah.
It fundamentally shifts the landscape. It democratizes the high-end compute, meaning innovation can come from anywhere, not just the massive tech companies.
So more people, more ideas.
More competition, faster progress. It means the pace of AI development is probably only going to accelerate, driven by a much, much broader community.
Wow. Okay, what an incredible tour of the AI landscape just from one day's News Digest. We've seen HuggingFace pushing the boundaries of truly open source with SmolLM3-3B.
Setting that new high watermark.
Yeah. And NVIDIA getting hyper-focused on coding smarts with open code reasoning Nematron.
Showing real performance gains there.
Then we took a critical look at the DGX Spark, separating the marketing from the actual specs.
Always important to look at that memory bandwidth.
Definitely. And then just how widespread AI is becoming Gemini Nano, potentially on billions of devices.
Locally, privately.
While at the other end, that super powerful compute from deep infra is suddenly dirt cheap and easy to access.
Incredible accessibility shift.
So if you tie all these threads together, what's the overarching theme?
I think if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's this dual trend, right? Open source is booming, models are getting more specialized and smaller, and crucially, the cost and difficulty of accessing top-tier infrastructure are just plummeting.
Lowering the barrier to entry dramatically.
Exactly. This combination of intense competition and just sheer accessibility means innovation is speeding up everywhere.
Yeah.
From tiny models on your phone to huge training runs in the cloud, it's happening at all scales now.
So, the final thought for you, our listener, as these incredibly powerful AI tools become almost trivially available, embedded in your browser, your phone, with cheap access to massive compute, what completely new, maybe unexpected applications are you going to see pop up in your daily life?
And maybe even more fundamentally, what new questions does this make you ask about intelligence itself now that the tools to explore it are truly starting to land in everyone's hands?